It's 3 a.m. on Tuesday, but that does mean that it is Tuesday, so we're going to do a top 10 video as we typically do. What am I going to get for you today? I thought I'd try something a little bit different. This is going to be my top 10 things that I want in 5th edition going forward, or really what I just want in general in 5th edition. That being said, there won't be any rules because this is my list of things that I want in 5th edition, so let's get started with the countdown. Number 10. Number 10 is very specific, but it's something that I want. I want a spell attack based cantrip for Bards and Clerics. So, out there, if you're using a lot of cantrips, I mean, it really only applies to those two classes, but Sorcerers, Warlock, Wizards, Druids, they all have attacking based cantrips. Now, what I don't mean I don't mean cantrips that deal damage. I mean cantrips where they actually roll a d20 and add their spell attack modifier to then do the damage. Clerics and Bards have a lot of cantrips that deal damage, but all of them are based on the enemy making a saving throw. And in a personal opinion that I have, as someone who plays a lot of Bards and a lot of Clerics, I would love an attacking one because I feel like my fate is in my own control. When I have to roll the d20 and then see whether I hit or miss, I feel like the failure is on me and I had control over it, even though it is random, determined by the die. Whereas if I ask the DM to make a dexterity saving throw against my Sacred Flame or a wisdom saving throw against my Vicious Mockery, I feel like I don't have control over that. And, there's always that little bit of cynicism where you're like, maybe the DM fudged the roll behind the screen. There's really no reason to, but you get my point. You're not in control of whether you hit or miss or they take damage or not. So that's something I want. An attack-based cantrip for Clerics and Bards. Number 9. Next up for number 9 is Scavenging rules or monster bits or whatever you want to call it. And I see this come up all the time, and I'm sure you have in your games too. You guys just kill a dragon, right? Or some really epic, cool monster that looks cool or has unique abilities. And you're like, we just killed a dragon. What do we do with this thing? Canonically, in 5th edition, as it stands, the only thing that you can technically make, and there's not even rules for that, which I'll get to that later, is Draconic Scale Mail, the magic item, which is great, but there are other parts of the dragon that could be used. In older editions, we had books, like one aptly named the Draconomicon, which was a book just about dragons and dragon classes and dragon parts and dragon items. So it's like, well, you have all these dragon bits. What do you want to do? Oh, you want to make a dragon-based axe out of the shoulder joint bone of a dragon? Sure. Here's the rules to make it. Here's what you can do with it. You want to make leather out of the dragon's skin? Sure. You want to make scale mail or plate mail out of its bones? Here's the stuff. So some sort of scavenging rules and economy-based thing for if I kill some creature and I harvest its parts. Well, first of all, rules for harvesting the parts from the creature. And then an idea for how much could I sell a dragon tooth for? How much could I sell a dragon eyeball for? A dragon heart? Whatever. That kind of a thing. So I know, and I'm sure you guys will tell me in the comments, and I'm well aware, there are plenty of third-party materials out there that handle all this, but, obviously everybody is entitled to their own opinion on what they think is correct, but I would like something official, canonical from Wizards of the Coast, so that we all know how they envision us using parts of things we slay for, going forward. Number 8. Again, similar to what I was just talking about, number 8 is actual good crafting rules. Yes, there are some very, very high level, like it's a paragraph, crafting rules in the player's handbook. And there are slightly expanded crafting rules in Xanathar's and the Dungeon Master's Guide for Creating Magic Items. But I want good crafting rules that shows me the process and multiple checks, and it really spells it out for me, not any of this wishy-washy. It takes this many work weeks of blah, blah, blah. I just did a review on a very popular DM's Guild supplement called the Complete Armorer's Handbook. I highly recommend you check that out. It's a great resource that replicates pretty much everything I'm talking about. But that being said, I would still like something official from Wizards of the Coast, a real crafting rules about different things you could do to armor and weapons to make them more useful, more interesting, unique armor materials and weapon materials, not just magic items or mundane. Number 7. Number 7, we sort of got in the class feature variant Unearthed Arcana, but this is the idea of kind of expansions and fixing issues with previous subclasses. So we saw that, or classes, right? We saw ideas for like, let's expand the spell list for clerics and bards and whatever else. And let's give paladins and fighters and everything new fighting styles. And I like the concept of that. I'd love for the class feature variant on Unearthed Arcana to become a published source in an existing 5th edition book. So that way, for people who play organized play or people who are on the fence about, I mean, I've been, and I'm sure you have too, in several campaigns where the DM says any published source is good, but published means only official Wizards of the Coast. It doesn't mean third party, and it doesn't mean Unearthed Arcana. I want something published. Well, if these class fixes were published, then that would be a way to get around it. And I think 5th edition has been out for 5 years, coming up on 6 in the summer of this year. We should have, the game has evolved. New players are in the game, new races, new spells, all this kind of stuff. I did a video on fixing the Tempest Cleric, just saying maybe we should swap out some of the spells because newer spells that fit the class more exist. So maybe that gets put out in a book or some sort of supplement that's official from Wizards so we can expand and improve the game as time goes on. Number 6. Number 6 is probably something that I'm in the minority with, but I would love spell-less character options. And I don't think you need to do it for every class, but I would do it for at least the Ranger and the Paladin. And what I mean by that is a version of that class where you remove spellcasting entirely. Now, that's obviously going to be tricky for Paladins in 5th edition, right? Because Smites, which is a core function of the class, is tied to the expenditure of spell slots. They tried something like this, I think, in the second ever released Unearthed Arcana, way back, called the Spellless Ranger. And it was a whole new Ranger, levels 1 to 20, with the idea of spellcasting removed. And they said, well, what can a Ranger do with spellcasting? These various things. Let's replicate most of those in class features. So the Spellless Ranger had an option to summon animals. The Spellless Ranger had an option to create healing salves to replicate cure wounds. And I think it would be cool to have an option in 5th edition if I wanted to play a Paladin or a Ranger and not have to have spells or spell slots, that I would have an option for me to do that. Now, if you want to take this a step further and somehow come up with a spell-less Bard and a spell-less Wizard, which doesn't actually make any sense, right, for a Wizard. So maybe a spell-less Bard and maybe a spell-less Cleric. I don't know. I really think you got to keep it to Paladin and Ranger. But I think it would be a cool option. It would add a lot of new play, and I could be playing a spell-less Paladin, and you could be a Paladin with spells, and we be very different from each other. Obviously, there's a lot that goes on there, right? Because you have to deal with how you're going to balance subclasses and things as well. But this is a high, pie in the sky list of what I want, and that's something that I do want. Number 5. Number 5 is more weapon options, right? We have a lot of weapons and weapon archetypes in 5th edition, but I think there's some that are lacking. For example, we have a 2d6 slashing weapon in the Greatsword and a 2d6 bludgeoning weapon in the Maul, but we don't have a 2d6 piercing weapon. We have a 1d12 slashing weapon in the Great Axe and a 1d12 piercing damage weapon in the Lance, but we don't have a 1d12 bludgeoning damage weapon, right? There's other resources if you look through this that you'll see, right? We have, I'm trying to see if there's anything else, right? We have a lot of these different weapons that fit a lot of different class archetypes or weapon archetypes, if you will. And I think that there should be a couple other options out there. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that jumps out at me? I don't see much, but for example, our only D10, we have a D10 slashing weapon in the glaive and a D10 piercing weapon in the pike, but we don't have any D10 bludgeoning damage weapons or reach weapons. You know what I mean? So there's a couple of different options here as you go through this where you're like, oh well, why don't we have anything like that? So I think that expanding this right now, obviously we could go crazy and go like, very unique, specific weapons that are tied to different cultures, right? Like we could try to get a 3-section staff or a Kusarigama or all these other kind of like ninja type weapons, which would be cool, and that might be ripe for an Eastern setting book. But I just think that there's options or opportunities for existing, like, fill the gap, right? Give us the D12 bludgeoning damage weapon, give us the 2d6 piercing weapon, things like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority on that, but that's just something that I like. Obviously, they kind of one of the things in 5th edition is they're like, well, a club could be a nunchuck, right? You just reflavor it. But I just feel like there's an opportunity for a few other types of weapons that don't exist in 5th edition to just expand things a little bit. Maybe a couple more simple ranged weapons, maybe a couple more simple base weapons, maybe a few more. I don't know. I don't know what the exact answer is, but I just want more weapon options because I'm tired of having to play the great sword wielding, two-handed wielder or the maul wielder or sword and board. I'm a sword and shield paladin, sword and shield fighter. Maybe I'll switch it up and be a war pick and shield fighter. But you get my point. I'd like something a little bit different, so more weapon options just helps to expand the role play and the combat descriptions and all that good stuff. Number 4. Number 4 is actual uses for gold. If you've played D&D 5e for a while and gotten to high levels, unless you're a wizard, you really don't have any actual use for gold, right? I've played through Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, and I've run Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. You get countless dragon treasure hoards in both of those campaigns, to the point where you are sitting on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of gold pieces. And if you don't have a wizard who needs to spend time and gold to copy spells into their spellbook, there's really not a good option for what you want to do with that gold. Like, especially if you allow people to sell magic items, which again, you're finding dragon hoards and tons of magic items. And if they go and sell those magic items, then they're going to have even more money and nothing to spend it on. Like, D&D doesn't have a really good option for building towns and creating businesses and strongholds and any of that kind of stuff. But that's basically the only thing that I know of in 5th edition that you can spend a ton of money on is that small section in the Dungeon Master's Guide about like buying a guild hall and all that kind of stuff. And if your players have zero interest in doing any of that, then there's no reason for you to have gold. It just becomes like I don't know, we're going to go buy healing potions. Okay, what does that dip into? A 30th of your overall wealth? Like, there's no good resource for that. At least in older editions, when we were crafting and making magic items with hard set rules, there was a definitive amount of gold you needed to spend. So if we get the good crafting rules that I asked about from an earlier number, which I think was number 7 or 8, then we'd actually have reason to spend our gold, or a good option for scavenging and creating stuff from monster bits. We could spend our gold on making that a reality. In my Hoard of the Dragon Queen campaign, we were trying to get compliance from a guard or a townsfolk, so I was just like, here, tell us what we want to know, here's 10,000 gold pieces. And it didn't bother me or my character at all to just give a random NPC 10,000 gold, because I didn't have time to deal with his bullshit, and the gold was doing nothing for me. So, like, that's what I mean. We don't have a good reason for that. And if you've played D&D in, like, a pre-written campaign that's gone towards the end into the high teens or the mid-teens, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Number 3. Number 3 is more +2 races. More +2 wisdom-based races. For the longest time, we didn't have any races that gave you a +2 to wisdom. The only way to do it was to be a variant human, put a +1 in one of your +1s in wisdom, and then choose a feat that also gave you a +1 wisdom. We got the Furbolg in Volo's Guide to Monsters as a +2 wisdom race, and we very recently just got the Kalishtar in the Eberron Rising from the Last War book. But if you're not playing with Eberron rules in your game, then that race isn't an option, so you're limited back to variant human with a racial feat, or with a feat that gives a +1 to wisdom, or a Furbolg. We have a ton of +2 charisma races. We have a ton of +2 dex races. More +2 wisdom races for those of us who like to play wisdom-based classes like Cleric would be something that I would like.
Number 2.
Number 2 is really just more feats, but more specifically, more racial feats. So, in Volo's Guide to Monsters, we got more racial feats. Or sorry, in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, rather, we got racial feats for the player's handbook races. That's great, but by that point, Volo's Guide to Monsters existed, and did the Elemental Evil Player's Companion that had the Genasi and everything. Now, thankfully, the folks at D&D Beyond released some expanded racial feats for those races, but those are not canon. Those are not official. So, by the time Xanathar's came out releasing racial feats for the player's handbook races, there was already 6 or 7 new races released in Volo's Guide, and we didn't get racial feats for those. We have since gotten immensely more. We've gotten the Tortle package, Lakatha, Xanathar's Guide, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. We've gotten a bunch of new races, and we still don't have racial feats for any of those. And honestly, I can't be the only one who feels this way. I really, really like feats. I know I did a video a long time back after I spoke with Jeremy Crawford at D&D Live 2019, and he said people don't really seem to like feats, so we're not putting a lot of focus on making new ones. Now, yes, a few feats will trickle out here and there in a campaign book when it makes sense, like the Revenant Blade Elf in Eberron Rising from the Last War and the Aberrant Dragon Mark. But I think we need more feats. I think we need fixes for the existing feats, but I'll do those on my own. But I would like more racial feats to help me truly identify more with my given character's race. If I'm whatever the race may be, a Tortle, I don't know, and I want to be more Tortly, I want a Tortle race feat, or something like that. Again, please let me know in the comments how you feel about this. But I think more racial feats, and again, more feats in general, would be a huge boon to the game.
Number 1.
Number 1 is a good ranger. That's it. I want a good, viable, playable ranger class that I would enjoy playing from levels 1 to whatever my campaign ends at, and I wouldn't feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot for choosing it, or I'm trying it just on a dare, which is every time I've tried to play a ranger in 5th edition. Someone's like, it's not that bad. It's that bad. Or I was just doing it to see if I could make it viable. Now, I come from a player who loved to play Rangers. Ranger was actually one of my favorite classes in 3.5. I had, in the few campaigns that I got to play in 3.5, I had several different Rangers. And, that was also Lord of the Rings hype when I started playing too. So there was hype for, bow users and Rangers and all that. And I also love pet classes, and Beastmaster Ranger is the only definitive pet class. And I really, really, really want to play a pet Beastmaster Ranger, or really any Ranger, and just feel like I'm not going to get outshadowed by my Paladin companion, who is a half-caster, who's a half-martial, half-caster like me with a D10 hit die, and they're just going to blow past me in every aspect, because they've got Fine Steed, which will be better than most of my pets, and their spell options with smites are immensely more damage powered, and I will never be anywhere near that, or have anything that becomes as useful at 1st level as Lay on Hands is at 20th level. I want stuff like that. I want my Ranger to be good, I want to play it, and I want to enjoy it. I don't know what the answer is. They've tried to fix it with Revised Ranger. They tried to fix it with the Alternative Class Features Ranger. Clearly, they are recognizing that something is wrong, but they don't want to admit it because they got rid of Revised Ranger, which everyone seemed to pretty much enjoy. Maybe I'll do a fixing a video on Ranger. It'll be a long one, but I'll give you my ultimate thoughts on what to do. So anyway, folks, that's my top 10 things that I want in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Let me know what your top 10 things, or top 5, or your most requested thing that you'd like to see in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I want to hear it in the comments below. Maybe in the future, I'll do a top 10 things that fans want in 5th edition from what you guys use in the comments down below. So anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. There's been a huge amount of you have subscribed in the past couple days. And it blew my mind to see those kind of numbers. And my goal of 25,000 by my birthday in July seems like it might actually be a thing. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. And I'll see you next time.